Is my screen visible?
Yes.
But till now we have seen how to build and if you see the DevOps life cycle, right? So the ultimate end output is an artifact. So we'll talk about that artifact and packages and how to share the libraries basically between different developers, or here we call it as feeds actually, right? So artifact feeds. So we'll talk about that. What we get an output of a CI pipeline is called as a build artifact, right? Many times what artifact can be directly consumed from Azure repository itself. You no need to take it from the build pipeline. You can directly take it from the Azure repos or GitHub or TFVC. Or we can also create Azure artifacts coming from Azure pipeline, right? It's called, this is where we'll use the feeds, Azure containers also, and Docker Hub and Jenkins also, right? So Jenkins output also can be used, which is coming from a CI pipeline to a CD pipeline, where that will become an artifact. You're getting it, right? So artifact can be taken it from multiple sources. It can be a build output, it can be Azure repos, it can be GitHub, TFVC, Azure artifacts, and many sources, right? Ultimately, what is an artifact? An artifact is a deployable component of your application, right? See, based on your application, you might generate different end objects, right? It can be a .dll, it can be a .exe, it can be a .var file or .jar file, .class file, right? Based on your requirement, the artifacts will vary your project to project. So ultimately, those artifacts are the component of your application. We will use those artifacts and we will deploy using our CD pipeline to respective destination. It can be a QA environment, it can be a pre-production or anything, right? These components can be then deployed to one or more environments. That's what we're talking about, like QA, development, or pre-production, production, and number of deployment environments. So ultimately, the artifact is a deployable component of your application, which can be deployed into your multiple environments, right? And what are the different ways to get your artifact? How do we get an artifact? There are different ways to create and retrieve artifacts, and not every method is appropriate for every situation. This is what. So based on your requirement, based on your project, the process, these things will vary, right? We can also deploy into on-premises, right? If you take Azure, you can deploy into Azure App Service also. You can use Azure Function. Even sometimes what the YAML file itself is an artifact, right? Ultimately, this is the input for your CD pipeline, right? Till now, what we have seen most of the time, so what we got it as a build artifact, which we got it from the build pipelines, right? The most common and most used way to get an artifact within the release pipeline is to use a build artifact, right? Why? Because most of the time and most of the projects are linked between your CI pipeline and the CD pipeline. So most of the time, the CI pipeline will take the source code from your repositories, and it will build and it will generate the artifact. So that will be the input for your CD pipeline. the build pipeline compiles, tests, and eventually produces, right, an artifact, an immutable package, right? See, once you generate this immutable package, right, you can store that into your storage accounts or database. Sometimes in few of the projects, your artifact can be an input from the database also, right? If you remember yesterday's the Jenkins one, .SQL files also were packaging, right? So that's right. Your database also can be a input artifact. So ultimately, the build artifact which gets generated from the build pipeline, and it will be packaged. If you remember, uh, our your Azure portal, sorry, DevOps portal. If you remember, pipelines, take any pipeline, speak about it. Ultimately, this was the artifact here, right? If you remember, for every pipeline, we have this. So we will be publishing from the build pipeline the artifact or the package, whatever is generated as part of that CI pipeline, that we moved it to the next, whatever the release pipeline, right? The release pipeline then use a secure connection to this secure place to get the build artifact and perform additional actions to deploy. That whatever we have used in release pipeline, that that will read the artifacts and deploy it. Which Azure artifacts. With Azure artifacts, you can create and share Maven, NPM, and we'll talk about these packages, right? There are different packages based on the language of your project, and we will create the feeds. It can be a public or private sources, right? I'll show you this practically, right? You can add fully integrated package management to your continuous integration and delivery pipelines with a single click. So that see, we can generate your package using your pipelines and integrate that to your CI pipeline, which will go and take care of deploying into your different environments what you have configured as part of your project requirement, right? Azure Artifacts introduce the concept of multiple feeds that you can use to organize and control access to your packages, right? See, you may have a number of packages, but ultimately the deliverables of your package can be controlled by having the access restrictions, right? If you are familiar with using package from maybe the NGet is from I'll talk about that, right? Maybe I'll get in there. Okay, I'll show you that maybe in a couple of minutes, right? These are the different artifacts, right? Supported artifact types. We're talking about Azure artifacts. Okay. Build artifacts. What is build artifact? Build artifacts are the files that you want to build and produce. Build artifacts can be nearly anything that your team needs to test or deploy your application, right? This is what we talked about, right? The build artifacts, what we got, .dlls, .exe, or .pdp, anything based on your language, right? Whereas the pipeline artifacts, you can use pipeline artifacts. There is a very minimal difference between the build artifacts and pipeline artifacts. You'll understand better, right? You can use your pipeline artifacts to help store build outputs and move immutable files between jobs in our pipeline, right? Pipeline artifacts are tied to the pipeline that they are created, right? Not a major difference between your build artifacts and the pipeline artifacts, right? pipeline artifacts are the new generation of build artifacts. That's all. So just it's kind of what do you say, updated way of using your artifacts, right? Because most of the projects are migrating from build, basically the way of the old model to a pipeline model, right? So that's where the pipeline artifacts are like a new generation of build artifacts. That's all, right?
Bhaskar, you
What
mean
is
to
the
say that
advantage
next
of that?
version of Bhaskar?
Yes.
So what is the major difference in build artifacts and like is the version 1 and this is the version 2? That what
They,
we can understand.
the next statement will give that they take an advantage of existing services to dramatically reduce the time it takes to store outputs in your pipelines, right? We are talking about only Azure artifacts here. Please remember that. Okay. If we use the pipeline artifacts, there are an additional advantage of using your services which are provided by the Azure. See, there are a number of services which are available in Azure DevOps, right? Which we have seen, right? So the advantage of using pipeline artifacts, there is no major difference. Maybe I'll show you some script so that you will understand better. Okay. Only the major advantage is it's like a tuned way of using your build artifacts. That's all. There's nothing. Don't get confused for now. Just the usage wise, it will give an added advantage of over the build artifacts. That's all. Right. And in case if it is Maven, Java project, you can publish your Maven artifacts to Azure, and you will understand better maybe after some time. Okay, I'll talk about that. How the build artifacts and the pipeline artifacts. I'll talk about that pipeline artifact, right? Earlier, only what used to be there used to be only classic pipelines. Then they moved on to AML pipelines. So you have in AML file, generally what happens, you will have a single file where you will maintain everything in a single file, right? You will write your complete end-to-end process, right? Different stages, basically, right? We can have your, let me click here. You have your QA, you have your development, you have your production, different stages you have, right? Maybe this is dev stages we are calling. Production stage. Here you have your artifacts. Right? So basically, if you have your pipeline artifacts, what happens? You can use them within the pipeline, and you can also download them from the build, right? Like these are all linked actually. If you see in the pipeline, single file, AML file, you have different stages. You can define your QA stage, you can define your development stage, you can define your production stage. Whereas if you use your pipeline artifacts, all are linked, right? The internally here, the way that DevOps is managed internally and optimized in the pipeline artifacts is basically your performance, everything is controlled internally in a better way if you use the pipeline artifact. So right. in background, actually, generally, if you compare with build artifacts, in pipeline artifacts, if you see, it is much faster than your build artifacts because it is internal within the pipeline, right? Since you are creating your pipeline for different stages, so the speed or overall the turnaround time is much better than using your build artifacts, right? You can also export and import for available DevOps services, basically, right? If you see, if you create a pipeline, this is how it lives. This is your AML file. We will create a task like this and publish build artifacts. This is how we will write in a build artifacts. But if you see that, for that, it will become, task will become publish pipeline artifact. The end result remains same. What is the difference? The performance makes the difference here. Using your publish artifacts, publish build artifacts and publish pipeline artifacts. The major difference is performance, right? See, you can specify path like this. If you remember, most of the time when we have created our pipelines, we have specified this build.artifact staging directory. You guys hope you remember, right? We have tried using parameters by using release and debug also, right? So instead of writing all these things, input this, all those things, you can just replace these 3 lines or 4 lines with just with this line. That's all. You see this? How many lines of code we have? Instead of all these things, we can just replace with this. It's fine tuning, right? You're getting it, right? Only the performance makes the major difference. Maybe you'll understand when we implement it. I'll show you how to create, right? How to publish basically artifacts. We'll create one dummy build and we'll generate some artifacts. We'll package that and we will publish those packages. Okay. You see here, output directory is artifact staging directory, right? And we can also do the copy. Right? I'm just trying to explain here different tasks to play with the artifacts. We can also copy the artifacts, right? See here. Before publishing, however, should generate output in some directory you should mention before copying it, right? This is one way. Or you can also copy the files by using this way. Task, you can write copy files to so and so location, and this is your source. This is the content which you want to copy, and this is your target, right? Generally, what happens most of the time, the artifacts will be the inputs for another pipelines, right? In our, if you look at the context of this pipeline concept, right? So ultimately, once you publish your artifacts, there will be another pipeline which will download these artifacts, right? So ultimately, you need to specify like this for downloading the artifacts from the previous one, right? This is task download build artifacts inputs. Whatever the build or inputs, you have to specify like this. Let me show you this in this is what I was showing earlier also, right? Where is this classic artifact? Edit. Go to your publish artifact. By default, the last one will be publish artifact, right? If you see the AML file, you see here, publish build artifact, right? Similarly, if you go to your release pipelines, it will download the artifact automatically, right? We have maybe if you run it, the automatically it will download the, you don't have to mention anything, right? How many are there? Just run it. I'm just trying to show the logs. No, simple what here. So automatically it will download the artifacts, right? Whereas if you see in our YAML file where you will have to explicitly specify this download artifacts. So if you want to download this in YAML file, you need to define your task. You need to give inputs like build type, whatever it is, and download type, single or multiple thing, artifact name. Most of the time, if you remember, our artifacts are created under the drop, right? And which is the download path. So you need to specify this. But the recommendation here, see, instead of using this download artifacts and the publish artifacts, where is your publish artifacts? If you use the publish pipeline artifacts and download pipeline artifacts, publish pipeline artifacts and download pipeline artifacts, these are considered to be more performance wise, it is more optimized, right? So basically, this is where it will take an advantage over the build, like how you specify here instead of this way, right? If you see any YAML file, right, generally if you take, there will be a multiple stages, right? You have your build, you have your dev, you have your QA, you have your production. Ultimately, the build will produce, here you have build, right? This is build, right? If you replace this build, publish build artifacts, instead of that, maybe let me show you here how to add. This is your YAML file. Edit. Here, publish artifacts, right? Right. Same thing, like how we have done, remember? Here, search for publish pipeline artifacts instead of, what is the default thing? If you remember, drop, right? Here, Azure pipeline, a file share. What is the difference? In case you have on-premises, because you need to specify your drive and all for the file share. So by default, Azure pipelines you select, right? Where cursor is in right place, right? Add. Like this, you can add. Yeah. A single download, basically, right? You can download a single artifact or multiple artifacts, right? Oh. Here, to download multiple artifacts, do not specify an artifact name and optionally use file matching patterns to limit which artifacts and files are downloaded. Right? Do not specify the name. The default file matching pattern is **, right? What is single artifact? When an artifact name is specified, if you want to download a single artifact, only files for this artifact are downloaded. Right? If this artifact does not exist, the task will fail. That is expected anyhow. Unless the specified download path is absolute, a folder with the name, with the same name, basically, right? As long as the folder is available, the artifact is created under that download path, right? Yeah. For example, to download all start.js files from the artifact web app, right? We can specify like this. Task is download pipeline artifacts. Input is your web app. From web app, what you are going to download? Pattern like start.js file. From the entire web app directory, you are going to download the JS files, right? Similar thing for multiple artifacts. Files from multiple artifacts can be downloaded. It can be downloaded from the single artifact or multiple, right? Artifacts in release and deployment jobs. If you are using pipeline artifacts to deliver artifacts to a classic release, remember this. You have to specify like this. None. Right. Here. See here, this is one of the jobs, which is deployment, where deploy web, right? Right. These are the few points to understand about the artifacts, right? And advantage over build artifacts, right? And what is package? What is package? See, what are we getting based on your, let me go back here. We will understand a little more in-depth knowledge of artifacts. Why do we need to generate the artifacts? And what are the different types of artifacts and packages we're going to get, and how to create a feed by connecting to the package. Example, if you are using the .NET NuGet package, right? Right. See, we'll try two things. One is, first we'll create a .NET project and we will try to generate artifact and we will publish that artifact to Azure artifacts. Don't get confused. There are two types of artifacts which we are talking about here. One is Azure artifacts. Where is your artifacts? This is different. Leave that. Azure artifacts are different than the pipeline artifacts. Please remember this. Don't get confused. This is kind of a centralized library where you can use these artifacts which are published to here, right? So why do we need? Let us understand this little bit. You have your, I'll take the example of, will be the best way of, right? Amazon you take, right? So in the Amazon, you have different services, right? Take either Prime or the website, anything is fine. If we take, you have different services, right? All are connected to your Amazon, right? This is your website or the Prime, you can say, right? You have your account details, or you have another one is like a list of movies, or you have a list of web series, right? Many things will be there. Ultimately, there is a common point where it is referring, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, if you take any project, there will be a dependencies between the components. Or if you take Microsoft Office itself, there are different components. Your Outlook is one component, your Word is one component, your PowerPoint is one component, right? Your Notepad is one component. There will be a common libraries which will be referred between these, right? So how to share those things? We'll call it as, if you want to compile, what do you need? Generally, if you remember, if you know any of the project, any language you take, you need something called libraries, right? Right? Compilers, basically, right? Where are we getting those compilers? If you want to compile your source, you are using Java C to compile the Java project, or Python, right, to compile, or Perl to compile, right? You are specifying the path of that language libraries wherever it is. If it is Java, Java libraries. If it is Python, Python. If it is whatever. So, right. So ultimately, it will go and refer that centralized library to compile these things. So those are called libraries. So by using those libraries, generally we will publish, right? As soon as you have your build here, right? This is your build. If you want to send the libraries of this build output, you need to publish this to some location, right? This will be your centralized library where you will publish here, central library, right? Lib libraries. Your binaries or libraries will get published to centralized place. From that centralized location, all the components will read those libraries and do their job, right? Whatever the task you have specified, right? Is it confusing or is it clear? Why do we need to publish our libraries? Because there will be a dependency most of the time on our other build components, right? We'll call it as libraries. Okay. A package is formalized way of creating distributed unit of software artifacts that can be consumed from another software solution, right? The package describes the content. It usually provides additional metadata, right? Generally, there will be different development teams. Assume that, forget about. So there will be one development team who is responsible for this. Take the same example here, right? There will be one development team to do this, one development team to do this. Between these two also, so there will be a publish is required. So this guy will also publish to central library. And again, if this guy wants, he will use it from here. This is bidirectional, right? Same thing. Same thing. Clear?
Simply, we can say references where the achieve the packages to deploy any any information like assembly informations on the to achieve to build or any services expecting the external services or any package references. So that will fulfill this library will be placed by all the services. Simple statement.
Right. It's a central place where people can reuse it, other dependencies. Okay.
Bhaskar, even CDN also, right? Content delivery network, where the externally we are consuming images, styles, even that one also we can consume, right? Here,
We can
CDN process.
I think we can include. I have not tried. Yeah, it should support. See, generally, if you take every organization will have multiple software development teams, right? They will be developing some piece of code which can be useful for other teams also, right? So we want to now keep all those packages into a centralized location where they can share between the multiple development teams, right? That is the need of basically, right? But definitely there are features available in Visual Studio. Example, I'm talking about .NET only. I mean, if you take anything for that, similar supporting options will be there. Majorly, if you see, there are 5 packages. One is NuGet, essentially used by .NET developers, and there is a NPM packages, which are mainly for the JavaScript, right? And similarly, and Maven for Java, and Python PyPy, basically, right? The Python packages and Docker. So these are the majorly used packages in the industry, right? You have Java, you have .NET, you have JavaScript, and you have Python, you have Docker, right? Docker also can be a package because all the required things can be put it in a single image and use it for further, right? Let's say simple, just to simplify, simple word. This is a store. NPM is a store. Maven is a store. Docker is a store. See, these are the what you will get in the store. If you go to store, you will get whatever is required inside that, right? So, but as a package, you have your stores. So that's what you can say.
Bhaskar, in simple sentence, whichever the plugins Jenkins we use to connect any the build pipeline, build or any plugins, the same like the NuGet packages is a plugin, the DLL references where we can plug in the any external source, any packages with using of these, like same like plugins we use, right? Connectivity.
Plugin,
I mean,
you can, you can consider that plugin is also like
plugin
a
is
single.
NuGet
Yeah,
packages.
yes. So I'll show you. I'll create one .NET project and we'll create feeds as well. Okay. Packages should be stored in a centralized place for distribution and consumption by others to take dependencies on the components it contains. Right. What we will do in Azure DevOps, we'll create a package. So we will actually put our packages into those feeds, right? There are 2 types of feeds, basically public feeds and private feeds, right? Each package type has its own type of feed, right? We'll say PyPy, it will have its own types of feeds, right? We can create a package feeds offers version storage of packages, right? It's kind of, let's say, version controlling kind of thing. You can have multiple versions of packages also. A certain package can exist in multiple versions in the feed, something of consumption of a specific version, right? Let's say if we take, even yesterday we were talking about Maven, right? There was 3.9.1, there is 3.6, there are 3.5, there are 3.8, right? Versions also we can mention, because if that itself is one good example, right? There was a set of library for Maven, which we are using, which we used in Jenkins, right? These are the URLs for your packages, right? There are only most of the commonly used list. There are a number of packages. We just specified only few things here. Okay. As I tell you, right, there are private feeds and public feeds. Within the private feeds, there are two options for private feeds: self-hosted and SaaS services. These are the SaaS services basically here, right? NuGet server is a self-hosted and SaaS service is available for this. You see here, there is one common thing across all these things, which is Azure Artifact. Even in NPM, you'll find Azure Artifact. Even in Maven, everywhere you got Azure Artifact, right? Of course, Docker, it is not there, because in Docker, you will not have a Azure Artifact, right? We don't use artifacts, basically Azure Artifacts. So basically, there is a Docker Hub or Azure Container Registry, right? For Amazon, you will have like Elastic Container Registry, right? Like that, there will be a Docker Hub for this. Okay. Now we would like to create Azure Artifact where we can publish the artifacts and consume the artifact, right? So here are two things we need to do it. One is how to publish the artifact, and the second thing is how to reuse the, right? One is building and publishing and using it. Clear? Build and use. Basically consuming, right? How to consume, right? We'll use that. You see here, upstream sources, when combining private and public sources, the order of resource resolution of the sources becomes important. What does it mean? If you are using, assume that if you are referring to one of the package where you have your public and private, what is the difference? Like, just to simplify, you have your global and local variables you have declared, right? Which one will have high priority, either global or local? Which will have priority? Which one will be considered as the first priority one? If you have your global declaration and you have your local declaration, take any variables.
Global only.
No, first preference goes to local. In case if something is not available locally, then it will go and look for your global ones, right? Similarly here, first it will go for your private thing because it is private, which will have more priority, because if something is available in the private, that will have the high priority. If something is not available in private, then it will go and look for the public, right? One way to specify multiple package sources is by choosing a primary source and specify. By choosing a primary source and then an upstream source, right? Let's say if I have a Visual Studio to connect to one primary source, let's say we have an Azure artifact, right? Basically what we have seen, a feed in Azure artifact. If I specify the Azure feed as my, artifact, I can also specify other sources as an upstream sources. So what happens? First, it will look for that feed, which I specified. If something is not available, what I'm looking for in that, then it will go and look for the upstream. It's not required. It's not readable. Right? The upstream source might be one of the official public source or private source, right? The upstream source could refer to another upstream source itself, creating a chain of sources. It's like, see, you can create a chain of sources and connect it to based on your requirement. A typical scenario is to use a private package source referring to a public upstream source for one of the official feed, right? That effectively enhances the packages in the upstream source with a package from the private feed, avoiding the need to publish private packages in a public feed. right? You'll understand better if I demonstrate, right? A source that has an upstream source defined. Okay. But let us understand this. Please understand this. First thing, what is package? Anything which we want to distribute so that others can use it, any dependencies, others, right? That we call it as a package. The package is available in different formats in different languages, right? Like these are the Java has what? Maven. Your JavaScript has NPM. Your Python has Python packages. Your .NET has NGet, right? These are the different packages which we have, right? So we will use one of these things and we'll create our clear. So we'll talk actually next session how to create feeds and how to connect all those things. Okay. We will create one project on .NET project. We will generate it. We'll create a package, right? We'll create a feed and we'll publish that feed and we'll utilize that feed into some other sources. The entire cycle will do it practically in next session. Okay.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
year we'll talk about it.
Okay. Bhaskar,
Yes.
still some questions like
Please.
why again we did some of the case studies like I mean you did at the earlier sessions for the build artifacts and pipeline artifacts. The build artifacts and pipeline artifacts still I'm confusing like still the connect to feed, create feed and upstream. So everything can be achieved in build artifacts. Like even we can only exes will be coded in the edit pipelines and achieve the build pipelines. What is the major like build
Just to simplify,
artifacts, build artifacts and pipeline artifacts?
Just to simplify, there is no difference. Both are same. What is the difference? The usage wise, it is difference. That's all, right?
Okay, only utilization is different.
In case if you are using, earlier there was only a classic pipelines. There was no AML pipelines. Okay. Since the AML pipelines have an added advantage over classic pipeline, because you can customize your AML pipeline than your classic pipelines, right? The AML pipeline is completely AML file, which you have better control than classic pipeline. So in case if you are using a AML pipelines, instead of using the build artifacts, use the pipeline artifacts. What is the advantage? The performance is the advantage. Otherwise, the end output remains same. There is no difference. Is it clear?
Yeah.
There is no difference practically. Performance is the difference. Your end results remain same. Both are same. Both will produce the same thing. There is no difference.
Behavior is same. Behavior is you can build the code from the Visual Studio or other and DLL or exe or publish the code
everything same. Everything remains same.
Behavior is all the same. That's what
everything remains same. Only the optimization purpose, it is recommended to use pipeline artifacts. That's all. It is recommended to use the pipeline artifacts. In case we are using AML pipelines. Okay. Any other doubts? Okay then. See you in next session. We'll do the same thing, whatever we discussed today practically. We'll create and we'll publish all those things. We'll do it.
Yeah, I think that will be clear.
Yeah, that will give a better idea for you.
Yesterday's,
Thank you.
Bhaskar?
Yes, Anand.
Yeah, regarding that Jenkins, did you get the time? Yesterday is one of the connection, right?
Check it. I
Connection,
didn't check actually. I will
service hook connection.
right. Service hook connection failed, right?
Yesterday we got failed, right?
Okay, we created service hook, but it was not displaying to use under pipelines, right? That was the issue we saw.
Yeah.
No, I didn't get a chance to check it. Tomorrow I'll show you that. Okay.
Thanks, Bhaskar. Thank you.
Or maybe no, it's already infected. First of all, is it working for me? Let me check. After restart, I did not try. It's working. I'll try.
Tomorrow also fine.
Let me try.
Yeah.
It won't take much time, like just to create. No, it should not take this much time. Okay, I'll show you one in one of the sessions. It's not an issue. Right? No, still I have same issue. I should also same problem. I don't know what was the issue. Because you guys are able to connect, only I'm not able to connect. Local firewall, I have not changed anything. Only the firewall block could give this issue. Not an issue. I'll check. If not, I'll will try to do it from, but it was not working from in that. I'll try to give full access for him. Somsekar for some. Okay. In case if it doesn't work,